Welcome to the Action Network podcast presented by FanDuel. Brendan Glasheen joined by Brandon Anderson and Jill Gallant. You're listening to our final episode of the 2022-23 NFL season, the Super Bowl 57 recap episode. What a game. So many twists and turns. An excellent night for football fans altogether. Kansas City, Super Bowl champions for the second time since 2019, 38-35. Chiefs over the Eagles. A lot to unpack from this game, folks. We will dive into all the nitty-gritty. We'll take you through the game. Was the MVP call appropriate? What did we hit? What did we miss? We'll get to a season recap as well, what Brandon and Jill learned from this season, some things they take into next year and going forward. And we'll mix in a hot read for 2023-2024 before we say goodbye. So hold the tears back, fellas. We've got some football to talk about. Then we'll dive into all the nitty-gritty of our emotions. We will start with Brandon Anderson. So as I said, Chiefs win 38-35. They cover as a dog. Patrick Mahomes now 7-3 straight up as an underdog, 8-1-1 against the number. And the over hits handedly in this game. If you took some live overs, I'm sure you're feeling pretty good about yourself this morning. Brandon, let's just jump in with a quick opening thought on how this game unfolded.
Yeah, I was trying to think of the right analogy, and I got to steal Nate Tice's analogy that I saw on Twitter. I felt like this game was the entirety of Game of Thrones. We had big characters, we had epic battle scenes, these great scenes, memorable, great movie, all sorts of good stuff. And then the ending. And then the ending is like the only thing you talk about. And it's like, oh man, the ending has spoiled the entire experience. And I wanted to just kind of step back and be like, no, this was a great game between the two best teams in football. We got the best of both of these offenses for most of the game. We had great plays. Both quarterbacks made awesome plays throughout. We had lots of fun, cool coaching stuff in this game. And then the Chiefs won, they finished the job. Patrick Mahomes got the job done. Here I am, Brandon Anderson. I bet against Patrick Mahomes and lost and lived to tell about it. But yeah, it was a great game. We'll have a lot of fun talking about it. And I kept thinking as we were going toward the end here, I was like, man, I wish we had like best of 7. Like, can we just keep watching these teams play again? That would have been fun to see how they adjust and go from there. But just great football.
Yeah, Jill, the build-up, I was ready for this thing to happen, right? We were just ready for kickoff. You're really beating a dead drum as far as just dissecting the game, picking it apart, who's healthy, who isn't, who's available, who isn't. And then you finally, to Brandon's point, it happens and you're looking for more still. That's what we like to do when it comes to football. We just want more. I saw Stuckey tweet this morning. There should be a college football bowl game on Monday. That's what we deserve here at this stage. But Jill, what'd you make of the night?
Yeah, I mean, the first quarter, you could argue it was one of the best first quarters in Super Bowl history. Just the way that the back and forth, the way that they were moving the ball on each other. Gainwell, touchdown bettors, got a little bit robbed there in the first quarter with Jalen Hurts then sneaking it in right after. And the first play of the second quarter was that long bomb to A.J. Brown for a second touchdown for the Eagles to bring it to 14-7. So it was just a lot of action right off the hop. Worked out well in my favor because I had first Chiefs touchdown to be Travis Kelce at plus 330, gave that out on the Best Bets pod. That hits, so I'm feeling over the moon. And then the A.J. Brown touchdown happens, and I'm just walking around my living room being like, this game is fucking awesome. Just like a classic casual fan, right? So, just one of those games that obviously the ending is going to be the most of what we talked about, but I think the biggest takeaway is that it's just difficult to defend a generational quarterback like Patrick Mahomes for a full 4 quarters.
So let's talk about the first half. Those first 2 drives, I think, encapsulate the two teams. Eagles, 13-play drive, churning out the clock, 75 yards, almost 5 minutes of time. Kansas City comes right back. Some big plays by the quarterback before he got hobbled. We'll get to that. In just 3 minutes, the Chiefs answer, and you got the feeling like, oh, we're in for a classic. We're in for a shootout. Brandon, when you look at the first half, Eagles up 24-14 at the end of 30 minutes, just dominating time of possession. We'll get to that too. And that's kind of what they've done all year, no matter who the opposition was. Make of what you will of their schedule and who their opponents were and who the quarterbacks were. But that was the Eagles were ready for the test. And But then Kansas City catches a break and they get a defensive touchdown thanks to a really, they're all errors are costly, but one that resulted in 7 for the Chiefs defense.
Yeah, I mean, obviously that for as great as the Eagles were in the first half, that defensive touchdown was the key play of the game. If you had to just pick one from a lot of big plays. So the play that's a little bit overlooked. So right before that, Eagles are on 2nd and 1. They get stuffed Kenneth Gainwell. So 3rd and 1. They line up for that unstoppable sneak. And I thought that push sneak kind of became sneakily a story. It was a story of the season for the Eagles. Mm-hmm. It was a story of the game here. By my count, the times that they were able to run that sneak or line up to run it, the Eagles were 7 of 8. They converted it 6 times. They had a penalty that they drew one time. However, the one that they missed is the play before the defensive touchdown where they lined up and then they got called correctly, I think, for a false start. They showed the close up. I think Somalo was got a false start there. But that is the play that went from 3rd and short, an unstoppable guaranteed first down that they got the whole rest of the game. And the next play, it's 3rd and long. Jalen Hurts tries to keep, gets stripped. Didn't really do that the entire season. Eagles never turned it over. They had great ball security all year. And then bam, Nick Bolton's in the end zone. We're 14-14. And look, if not for that, it's 24-7 at the half. The Eagles had 20 series and turned 17 of them into first downs. Patrick Mahomes was on the field less than Rihanna in the first half, basically. Like it was just domination otherwise. But that one defensive score, minus 8.5 EPA points. So 8.5 expected points toward the Chiefs, not just the touchdown. But remember, the Eagles are out by the 50. They're going to score because they scored on nearly every drive this game. So that took points away from the Eagles and put them on the scoreboard for the Chiefs. We talked about the defensive touchdown. I had Philadelphia as best bet. Didn't hit that one. At FanDuel, it was just plus 300 for any defensive touchdown. So hopefully you got that one. 16 defensive scores now in the last 31 Super Bowls, which is just a wild number. And importantly, 21 out of 22 all-time defensive Super Bowl scores by the winning team. So the Chiefs did keep that one alive.
Yeah, looking back and you just mapped it out before the defensive score. What I do applaud Sirianni, that staff, as well as Jalen Hurts and that offense, that they do play with urgency no matter the score. They understand being up just a touchdown, that in a way makes the Kansas City Chiefs dangerous. The Eagles played the whole night as if they were trailing, and they think that speaks to, well, they haven't been in many of these spots this year where they've trailed, but they play like they're trailing with some of their play calls. The play moves to 3rd and 5, and then you get the defensive score, Jill. And the minute that happens, I think, like the Eagles still playing with that mentality, it bit them. And granted, it's a fluky play, I think, because Hurts, generally speaking, has been pretty great with ball control and valuing the football.
Yeah. And the one thing I was going to say too, Brendan, about that, and I'm not sure how much it played a part, but the field conditions in this game were just horrible. Like nobody could get proper footing. Yeah. And from an Eagles defense standpoint, it really put them on their back foot because, again, sorry for the pun there, but again, Mahomes getting it out quickly, but they had no sacks on Patrick Mahomes the entire game. That was the book, is that this defense is historic, the 85 Bears type of sacks numbers kind of thing. And they couldn't really get to him. They didn't really get much pressure on him at all to really affect him. And, but on the flip side, it actually was very much aiding Eagles props. Like anybody who was betting an over on an Eagles prop, whether that be was Jalen Hurts rushing yards, all 3 receivers, both AJ Brown, Devontae Smith, and Dallas Goedert, go over their receiving yard props. Kenneth Gainwell's having a game. He's getting over his rushing yard prop and receiving yard prop. I think the only guy that was completely fell short and was actually, I think, went to the locker room with a little bit of an injury was Miles Sanders. So outside of that, if you're an Eagles bettor, you were feeling pretty good going into halftime because you felt like, okay, we're up by 10. I'm hitting all of my props. I know there was a ton of people out there in social media that I saw that was basically just going all in on Eagles sides and props on that nature. So they were walking into halftime feeling pretty good. But then especially with the fact that Mahomes, his ankle injury again flares up. You think, okay, we're going to see a repeat of the second half of the way he looked against the Jaguars. No, he comes out, and you could argue that Toradol now is probably the MVP of this game. And you could even argue as well that stock prices of Toradol have probably gone up because of just the mere mention of being used over the last 3 weeks. Like, I could argue that Toradol has been used on broadcast more in the last 3 weeks than it probably was used the entire season.
Did you guys catch, so going into the second half, right before the half started, did you guys catch Aaron Andrews say that the Chiefs do not make Andy Reid available when the Chiefs are trailing at halftime? I found that very interesting. I'm like, oh, fitting that when the quarterback got hurt, that the coach couldn't weigh in because the team was losing by 10. I just thought that was interesting because, well, that's part of the story, though, is the quarterback healthy. So Aaron Andrews did not get access to Andy Reid at halftime to give the people an understanding as to what the plan might be at quarterback. If it's going to be Chad Henne, will Mahomes return? As we know, Mahomes did go back out there. I just thought that was an interesting note. Oh, well, it's because they're losing. This is normal Chiefs protocol at halftime, that when they don't have a lead, the coach is not available. Felt very Belichickian.
Chad Henne just retired too, retiring as a champion.
I saw that. Hey, he made plenty of big plays in their runs before when he had to sub in when the helmet comes off and he makes that play to, I think it was Tyreek Hill a couple years ago
against the Jaguars. Play. He threw that touchdown to Travis Kelce to kind of keep
just
that
this
game
year
at pace. Yeah. So
again,
he was very vital for them.
I think too the length of the halftime show weirdly ended up being a factor here because you get a little more time for Mahomes to get that ankle right. You know, I'm sure they did a little work there. And I thought the difference in Chiefs coaching in particular was massive from first half to second half. Some of the adjustments that they made and some of the play calls that they brought out in the second half, kind of seeing, okay, here's some tendencies we found. And that is a thing the Eagles coaching had been great at all season. I thought Nick Sirianni and the Eagles coaching, I have notes all over the place, masterclass for the first 2.5 to 3 quarters. You mentioned that the Eagles played with urgency. Yes and no. They played like the team that had to put up points, but from the start, I noticed they milked that clock down. They were running the play clock, everyone down to like, oh, it's going to be a delay of game. Nope, they got it off. But I think that was a plan from the start. It just shorten the game. No plays for Pat Mahomes, guys. Just keep them over there. Just keep running the clock. And they did a great job multiple times until the one that really mattered. They didn't call a timeout to stop a delay of game. They would not burn those timeouts because Sirianni knew how important they were. Just lots of those little edges. Obviously, the fourth down aggressions and the plays to set up the fourth down. Mm-hmm. Those are the things like those little 2% edges that just kept adding up all game. And I thought that was going to be the story, the Nick Sirianni masterclass coaching against Andy Reid. And then the long halftime, I think, switched that around a little bit. It's interesting, too. I noticed this on Twitter. At the beginning of the half, I saw the Chiefs heading into halftime. It was plus 370 on the money line. No snaps. Nothing happened. And by the time that we took the next snap, that had dropped down to plus 280. So I bought a little Patrick Mahomes insurance at halftime. Hopefully you saw that on the app or on Twitter, able to follow just a little bit. It's still Pat, you know. I had the Eagles cap. I was on them. But it's Pat. You never know. And then we come out and right away, things look different. We knew the Chiefs would get the ball out of the half. They come down and get the touchdown right away. And then the Eagles had 17-play drive, the longest drive by plays in Super Bowl history. And at that point, I think that's on the broadcast, literally double as many plays as the Chiefs had. And you should be up a lot, but they settled for the field goal. Just before the half, I thought they a little bit settled for the field goal. They could have maybe run another play or two after the big A.J. Brown catch. And that was toward the end, all the good things Sirianni did this game and had been doing all season, all that aggression. It's like he got a little bit of cold feet maybe a couple of times. They called the timeout before that field goal, 3rd and 11. They kept it 3rd and 11, then dump it off to Kenneth Gainwell. That is not the aggressive sort of play they were doing. And then they get the field goal. But the field goal, that's a victory for the Chiefs there. So I'm talking about when the Chiefs go up 27, the Eagles go up 27-21.
Yep.
At that point, as much as the Eagles had dominated and had just run the clock so long, the Chiefs defense is just gashed and been on the field the whole game. I was like, 27-21. And here's Pat. There he comes on the other side. And sure enough, after that field goal decision, the Eagles had only 11 more plays the whole rest of the game that they even saw the field offensively.
Just to backtrack for a minute, too, and I know Bet What Happens Live, Jill was with Nick Giffen. I thought the Pacheco call was phenomenal, and that 7-yard run to start that third quarter drive was massive. I know a lot of folks at Action were on the under longest rush for Jerick McKinnon. That broke my heart. 14 yards, Jerick McKinnon, really, of all people, on a 3rd and 1. So the way they ran the ball really well, I thought Kansas City, Andy Reid had discipline. We're going to still run the ball. We got to ease Pat back in here, despite, to Brandon's point, having that extra time with the halftime show to get Mahomes ready. I thought that was crucial. As we know, on the touchdown drive following by Philadelphia, the controversial, was it a fumble or was it a catch or was it an incomplete pass, or a catch, then fumble, or an incomplete pass? They end up ruling it incomplete pass. That could have swayed the game, as we talked about early on. Possibly not 1, but 2 defensive touchdowns, not the case. And then kind of speeding back up to where Brandon just left us, the field goal by Philadelphia later in that third quarter ended up being massive for the Chiefs, because then they come back down and score. And Kadarius Toney was also missing in this game as a receiver, but whoa, he made his presence felt on the 65-yard punt return to set up another Kansas City touchdown early on in the fourth quarter, or at least right after the touchdown by the Chiefs in the fourth. Eagles punt, and then of course the return sets up an easy score. So that was huge. And then, oh my goodness, the Chiefs, the defense, there was no defense on Devontae Smith, Jill, which then set up another score by the goal line for Jalen Hurts.
Yeah, I know a lot of guys who had Devontae Smith anytime touchdown and were pissed that he did not calculate kind of where he was on the field, because that's usually his bread and butter, is that he is very aware of where he is on the field and body control. And he goes out at the 4-yard line. Jalen Hurts gets the octopus, rushes for a touchdown and the 2-point conversion. I wanted to actually bring this down to a little bit more of a macro level. Instead of looking at Sirianni versus Reid, I thought it was more of a masterclass of Bieniemy versus Gannon, because Gannon, the defensive coordinator for the Eagles, he was playing zone defense against this team the entire time, and they were just eating it up, especially in the second half. And when they got to the goal line, it was almost like they didn't know what to do, because Sky Moore and Kadarius Toney both score on wide open touchdowns the same way too, because what they would do is they would run in towards the line and the secondary would catch up on them, and then they would break out. And it was like both times they were wide open on that, which kind of is a little foreshadowing to what happened to the end of the game there. We could talk about that a little bit more between Bradbury and Juju Smith-Schuster. But yeah, the one thing I was going to say about Toney is it was the full Kadarius Toney experience. He drops the 3rd down conversion. He only gets 1 catch, but it's the catch for a 5-yard touchdown. And then he has the longest punt return in Super Bowl history. Again, it was just the full Kadarius Toney experience, if you're a better. But we would think, well, the biggest touchdown odds that was hitting in this game was the KC defense. Actually, no, Sky Moore, when he scored that touchdown, he was actually at 11-1 to score a touchdown. And coming into the game, he was talked about how he was going to probably be used sparingly. The fact that both Juju and Kadarius Toney are going to be playing, and he catches what is the game-winning touchdown in a sense, right? So that was probably one of the biggest things that I just found from a takeaway standpoint, is that Gannon, who is being considered for some head coaching jobs, I'm not sure if he's going to still be in that position going forward, because Andy Reid and Bieniemy and the entire coaching staff just did a number on them in the second half, where the Eagles did not know what to do.
That was Sky Moore's first touchdown of the season.
It was
career, right?
Career,
he's a rookie.
Rookie
yeah, because he's a rookie. Yeah,
good time for it. Yeah, I want to jump in on that. That to me, the sequence, I don't want to skim quite past it. Before the Eagles got their last touchdown there, to me, that sequence right before that, the punt return, the touchdown, and the drive before, to me, that's the key sequence of this game. So just a couple of things to point out. I want to talk about that Kadarius Toney play as well. So Eagles have 3rd down. They called it 3rd and 2 on screen. It looked like 3rd and 3. They're on the 32-yard line. And again, the whole game, the Eagles, they're down a point at this point, and they're backed up a little bit the whole game. they're just moving the chains. Just 3rd and 3, just run the ball. You know that if you can get 2 yards, it's a first down because 4th and 1, you're unstoppable. You've never stopped the Hurts push sneak all game. And instead, I thought they got a little too creative with play calling offensively. They tried to do a little pass, and then Spags dialed up the pressure, and Hurts kept doing like spinning left to get out of pressure. He's useless spinning left. Like the play is dead. He can't throw across his body or do some of the stuff that Mahomes or others can. So I thought that was a bad play call. Now it's 4th down and a long 2 or 3 on their own 32. But Sirianni, I think, goes for that. If it's the first quarter, I think he goes for that. If it's the regular season, I know he goes for it. We saw him go for it around there against the Niners first drive last week. I thought it was a poor decision to just punt the ball away. And then, bad punt. The stocky covered special teams a lot for us. The punter was a big difference in this game. The Eagles literally activated their punter just before the game. Chiefs had the best punter in football. So we get a bad low punt. Low punt means the coverage can't get down the field in time. And Kadarius had a great return. Like he had to kind of squeeze around from the left and get back over to where his blockers all were, and has the great return down there. Then Chiefs are at the 5, but it gets the 3rd down. And I'm thinking, okay, Eagles, one stop here, because Sirianni probably would have gone for it there, but Andy's going to settle for the field goal. We've seen him do that a lot of times, thinking one stop. And that's that touchdown now to Kadarius. Or sorry, that one's, I think is that Sky Moore or Kadarius?
That was Sky Moore.
Sky Moore caught the touchdown after the Tony return.
Yeah. So that play, Joe, you mentioned that they basically look the same. That was the same play. That's the identical play flipped when it's Sky on the next one. And what's so cool, and this is where Andy Reid, I thought, and Bieniemy were incredible. That play was run against the Eagles by the Jaguars back in week 3 by Doug Peterson. They put a guy in motion in and then out, and saw that the Eagles didn't flip their coverage to get to that guy. And the Jags got an easy walk-in touchdown. Week 3, the Chiefs basically didn't run that the whole year and saved it for that moment, and then saw it work so well that they ran it for another touchdown and another key 3rd down, and ran it for essentially the winning play on the 3rd down to do the penalty by running it a 3rd time, but flipping it and having the receiver go back out for the penalty. So that was a huge, just incredible play. The other one too, for Andy Reid, late in the game, the Mahomes had the long scramble that got them down in the field goal range. Right before that, another 3rd and 1. The Chiefs have not been good in 3rd and short all year because they didn't run the ball well. And the Chiefs on that play ran Pacheco for like a 10-yard kind of sweep out to the left. And that play that they had, they put Burton on the field, their fullback, who basically never plays for them, like 7% snap rate. That play is directly a play that the Lions ran week 1 against the Eagles. And the Chiefs saw that play, kept it in their back pocket in case we might need it sometime the whole season. And then with the season on the line, 3rd down and 1, Andy Reid pulls it out. The Eagles can't be prepared for that. The Chiefs haven't run it all year. They held these plays back the entire season. And like, as much as I had all my Sirianni masterclass notes and I thought the in-game coaching edge would really go to Philly, and Andy Reid and Bieniemy, they made me eat my words. I don't even know. I wouldn't even say negatives about Gannon. Like the zone D doesn't stop it, but I thought this was just good offense wins, and they had the right play calls, and that sequence for me, I would have rather Andy gone for 2 for the 9-point lead there, but that sequence changed everything for me.
That was what I was going to ask you, Brandon, is that we could praise Reid and Bieniemy with the way that they were playing in the second half, but not going for that 2-point conversion. That could have really came back to cost them. And luckily, they were able to convert on the octopus with Jalen Hurts the next way down. But there was a real possibility that people were talking about if he had not converted a 2-point and they only had a 7-point lead, that Sirianni might have went for 2 anyway on that next touchdown drive just because of how aggressive he is. Now, I didn't necessarily agree with that because, again, it's the Super Bowl. I want to be aggressive, but at the same time, let's not go nuts. But there's real possibility that Reid could have put himself in a more vulnerable standpoint there. So I think that's the only thing that I would say is I understand why Reid did take the extra point instead of the 2-point, but man, in the moment you were like, what are you doing? So yeah, that was my biggest takeaway from that too, from a coaching staff standpoint.
Okay. I'm glad I'm not alone.
I would have for sure gone for 2 in that moment. I thought the big decisions, the go for the field goal early, we didn't mention that. I thought Reed made a big mistake there that cost the team points. Not going for two. Reed's decisions on those key plays, the decision making, I thought cost the Chiefs maybe like 7 to 10 points in this game, and key moments that could have been the big story, but the play calling along the way, that's the strength. Sirianni's decisions, but Reed's play calling.
I'm glad I'm not alone on that because I'm yelling at the TV. Go for two. Make this a 9-point game. Make it a 2-score game. So it doesn't play out. But to Andy Reid's credit, he gets a lot of crap for not handling the clock well. And I know the officials were part of this at the end. We'll get to that. They were part of the game, the whole game. So let's be fair. As Brandon said, it's easy to pick apart the end. They were a factor. We mapped out some of those plays earlier in the game. The officials, the non-Devontae Smith catch, the Miles Sanders, like I brought up, was it a catch and fumble, or was it an incomplete pass? Incomplete pass, which helped the Eagles, by the way. And then the play at the end, the hold on Juju Smith-Schuster, which I'm blanking on who got called for holding, but the player admitted Barry. He admitted after the game that he held him, which that's big for people of Philadelphia, even if
it's really,
he's not.
it's really nice of him.
Yeah.
Nice guys finished last.
So Brandon, take us.
Joe, you mentioned the octopus plus 1,400 first Super Bowl octopus. I can't say I put any odds out for that, but that was the octopus and the Jalen Hurts 3 touchdowns. Did you see any people hit either one of those?
I mean, it's, for the Super Bowl, pretty much I was expecting a Discord screenshot of somebody having Nick Bolton for MVP. So again, nothing really surprises me anymore when it comes to certain angles, because there's always somebody out there that has it. So I did see a few tickets at the 35-1 hitting Jalen Hurts. I did see, the KC defensive touchdown. So yeah, you did see stuff like that. But again, it was probably just a handful of people that actually had it. But guys, I got to think the biggest takeaway from this game was that defensive penalty at the end. That is really what everybody's going to talk about in this game. We could talk about how awesome Mahomes was, how awesome Jalen Hurts was. Unfortunately, the ending, even if we may disagree on kind of what happened and all that stuff, I think that is going to be the takeaway outside of the 4th down conversion, the Eagles play that they run, if whether or not that is going to be allowed in football games going forward because of potential injury risk and just the edge that it gives. Like, a lot of the time they got to give the defensive side at least some ability to be able to defend the ball. And that's nearly an unstoppable play. So I'm wondering if those two things, that'll be the biggest takeaways from this game, is outlawing that play and maybe even potentially outlawing that defensive penalty call.
You got a thought on that, Brandon? As far as the final drive, what set up the win, and then I know you had some thoughts there just on the Chiefs. You had said coming out of the halftime show that you thought the way the Chiefs kind of dissected what occurred, you felt they learned something from the first half and how they came out, and then of course the penalty helps. They were already in field goal range, I would add, before that, but take us through the final drive before we.
So second half, the Chiefs had the ball for 4 drives. They scored 24 points, and it was only not 28 because Jerick McKinnon decided it wasn't 28 and slid down there. The Chiefs had 230 possible yards to gain from when they got the ball in the second half. They gained all of them. They got them all. The only one they ended up with 221 because they got 229 and then knelt a couple times back at the end.
Right. So -7 total. Mahomes back 5, then back 2 on the kneel downs.
Yep. And they averaged almost 7 yards a play, the Chiefs, the entire second half. Patrick Mahomes, last play of the first half, comes up limping. That 3rd down and long, he kind of scrambles, he takes the hit, and we're all wondering what happened. Well, what happened is 13 of 14 in the second half. The one incompletion was a throwaway. So on purpose, he had 2 touchdowns in 0.65 EPA per play, which is just an outrageous high, absurd number. So that's the Chiefs of the second half. No penalties, no turnovers, no punts, no sacks the entire game. So Mahomes comes down. I mentioned the Pacheco 3rd down and 1 run. That was huge. Up until that play, the Eagles get a stop there. I think they're the favored team because you get the ball back, and it's not like the Chiefs defense really won the game here. Chiefs defense came up big on like 2 or 3 huge plays, and otherwise the Eagles were pretty much moving the ball whenever they needed to. Even the only thing that really stopped the Eagles offense was that time ran out and that there were a couple key penalties that were right. and the one fumble. So other than that, the Eagles were doing what they needed to. So Pacheco gets the run. And then I'm so upset about the penalty, not about the penalty itself, but because right before that, Patrick Mahomes has this like all-time Pat Mahomes moment on a bad ankle, grimacing, runs up the middle, scrambles for 26 yards. The Eagles' scramble defense was a talking point. That was a big thing. So Mahomes, 26 yards, basically what ended up being kind of the clinching play. So after that, third down, Eagles need to get off for the penalty. But at the Mahomes run, it's 1st and 10 on the 17. The moment he goes down, there's 2:46 left. This is where I thought Sirianni screwed up a little bit again, the coaching staff. You got to call timeout right away. 2:46, let it take all the way down there, almost the 2-minute warning. You're down to only 2 timeouts. They burned one earlier, and that ended up being huge here. They call timeout. And at that point,
hold on, real quick. Was the one he burned a challenge? Was the challenge on Smith?
No, that was a Reed challenge. So that was the one that he burned was in the third quarter, the play before the field goal on the 17-play drive. I mentioned earlier that they had consistently not called timeouts to save the delay of game. They purposely would take the 5 yards. 3rd and 11, they called the timeout.
Right.
And then did a dump off play to Gainwell that didn't do much anyway. So that's the one that felt like the one burn timeout, the thing they hadn't done all year, really. So on the play to Juju, here's what I think. On the one hand, I think the conversation is overblown. The call was questionable. I don't know if it was bad. I don't know if it was good. I don't know if it's you swallow your whistle at the big moment. All of that narrative, I can't do it. The decision to commit the penalty is the problem. And that is on James Bradbury, and that's on the coaching staff, because it was the worst possible outcome to commit a penalty and give them the first down. Give up the touchdown. That is a way better outcome for you. In that moment, you're down 7 with the ball and a chance to go down and tie or try to win something. You have a chance. The decision to grab onto him was the big egregious problem, not the call itself. On the other hand, the people who are saying, oh, well, the Eagles they're screwed anyways. The Chiefs were just going to score. It didn't matter. Win probability. 1:50-ish left. At that point, if you're the team, like basically you put the win probability calculator, the Chiefs were 26%, or the Eagles are 26% likely to win at that point. After the penalty, and then McKinnon, smart play to slide down, and you run the clock down, and basically now the Eagles get the ball back with like one play left deep in their own. Like you're in miracle range. You're in, sorry, Brennan, like Patriots miracle into the Raiders sort of range here, where you need some wild, crazy finish.
Oh,
so,
that Patriots team. Got it now.
Yeah, that one. Yeah, that team. So 26% down to 0%. 26 is not very good. The Eagles were unlikely to win. They would have had to go down and get a touchdown or a field goal and maybe win overtime. But 26 down to 0. That's what the penalty did. Was it took a long shot chance for the Eagles to basically a no shot chance for the Eagles.
Yep. Well said. Yeah, you give up the touchdown there. I tend to agree. I kept thinking, okay, they're going to let him score. They're going to let him score. It just never happened. Patrick Mahomes, MVP. Jill, you have thoughts on that?
My only thought was that we talked about it off air. Like, should you have bet it pregame? And I don't think so. Like, I don't think you would have taken Mahomes in this spot because the Chiefs were already underdogs. Like, part of the reason why you would take an MVP at that low of odds is if they're already favored and you're trying to find a more profitable angle, because it's more likely that if they're going to win, it's probably going to be the MVP. That would have worked had you been doing it on the Jalen Hurts side, because they were favored by -1, -1.5, depending on when you bet it throughout the week. He's around +130 for MVP. Had the Eagles won, he certainly would have won MVP. And I mean, going into halftime, I mean, you could make a case that Kelsey was probably going to win it in the first half. I mean, Nick Bolton, if we could determine what a catch was, probably would have won MVP in that spot. But yeah, I think that was it, is that the right player won. But at the same time, from a betting perspective, it's probably wasn't the best approach to bet on Mahomes pregame at the +130 odds, especially when he was around +350 entering conference championship week.
Yeah, well, and it's interesting. The two biggest plays of the game for the Chiefs, I thought, and by win probability, were the defensive score that Nick Bolton had, and then the Kadarius Toney punt return. That was a 19% win probability to swing 65 yards Those 2 plays were worth 13.4 expected points. 2 plays, 37% win probability in a coin flip game while Patrick Mahomes watched on the sidelines. That's not taking anything away. Mahomes was magnificent. He was incredible, untouchable in the second half, but you win with the team, and the Chiefs team helped them win the game on special teams, which didn't happen great all season for them, and then on defense, which was even worse for much of the season. But those guys came through. There's some talk about, well, should Jalen Hurts have been MVP in a losing cause? Jalen Hurts was fantastic. Jalen Hurts had 0.4 EPA per play outside of the fumble. His numbers were incredible. I thought just as a passer, at times he outplayed Mahomes. He just had dialed up some just dimes to Dallas Goedert, to Devontae Smith, these great throws. Eagles, especially on late downs, were incredible. But you don't get to take away the fumble 6. If you are the guy that fumbles the ball away and gives up the play that costs you the game, you're not the MVP in a losing cause. You're also the reason you're the losing cause. Like, you get all the good and the bad. I thought that was going to disqualifying for Hurts. Mahomes was great, MVP. He's the 5th player now with multiple Super Bowl MVPs. So what's wild is, so that list is, of course, Eli Manning, got to start there. Terry Bradshaw, Bart Starr, 2 each. Joe Montana with 3. And some guy named Tom has 5, I guess. So Pat Mahomes joins the list. What's crazy, I put this poll up on Twitter. If you just set the line, and I thought about this before I put there, over under, here, I'm gonna let you respond live. Over under 1.5 more Super Bowl MVPs for Patrick Mahomes the rest of his career. I put some juice on the over. So over 1.5 more MVPs, I'll say minus 120. You gonna take the over, or you play the under on that one?
I mean, I'll go first. I would take the under if you're going to give me the under at plus money. I think that would be the obvious angle that I would look at, just because, again, it was literally like maybe 1-2 play difference that Mahomes doesn't win MVP in this game. So there's just a lot of things. We talk about this coming into these games all the time, about the wacky, weird stuff that happens in these games. So that would be my issue, is that they got to get to the Super Bowl and that wacky stuff doesn't happen. So that would be my only counter of why I would take the under, but the over is, I would say that the odds are priced appropriately.
Well, I think Jill nailed it in that analysis, the under, because of the difficulty of the conference. Yeah. I mean, there's no given you're in that game. You're probably in the Final Four, but to win the AFC title game, we saw what happened for the Chiefs to even get to the Super Bowl. It was dicey in of itself to even get to the game.
I mean, even if Burrow drives down the field in the AFC Championship game, the Bengals are back in the Super Bowl again. It was it was literally just margins and just small percentages that would have changed the difference of that outcome. So yeah, I think the only reason why you take the under is just you're betting responsibly.
It's a wild thought that 6 humans in history have had multiple Super Bowl MVPs, and we have to set a line of, will he have 2 more Super Bowl MVPs? Will he, in the rest of his life, do a thing only 6 people in history have done again? And we still kind of think he might.
Well, and too, just considering what they've done. Now, Mahomes has set a standard, now I know he's making $400 million. I get that. But he set a standard there, taking a little less. They let go of Tyreek Hill. If they have to insert, plug and play different pieces over the years, similar to what they did in Foxborough for 2 decades, it will be about him. So that does bode well for Patrick Mahomes, that it might not be, I mean, Travis Kelce is a very fair option, but if they're just going to plug and play receivers for years to come, running backs, I mean, Pacheco, we know his story was phenomenal. It being Patrick Mahomes is a safe bet when it comes to just picking apart the Chiefs roster. Who would it be if they were to win another Super Bowl or 2 or 3? It's going to come down to him. And of course, in this particular Super Bowl, the injury, the buildup, he got hurt again in this game. That all bodes well. Even in a year where he's healthy, and I put healthy in air quotes because no one's healthy at this time of year, it's probably going his way because of how he's kept the whole thing together with the coach too. Before we move on to the season recap, you guys have a couple thoughts from the year, some lessons learned, and we'll get a quick hot read for next year because we just can't help ourselves. What did we hit? What did we miss? And I want to go to Jill here first, because the Travis Kelce, not the first touchdown of the game, as we found out that was not the case, but the first Kansas City touchdown was one of your picks, and that delivered.
Yeah, absolutely. And So takeaways from, are we talking about the season or the actual game?
Just a quick betting recap from what your day was like yesterday, specifically.
Oh, well, well, obviously
Sour
from that
subjects.
standpoint, felt pretty good. I mean, obviously to get Kelsey early, you get Hurts early. So from a chalk standpoint, pretty much everybody was on those two guys. So chalk wins, especially in the Super Bowl. Cooper Kupp was the most bet touchdown scorer the year prior. He scored in that game. Travis Kelce, same thing. So I think that's the one thing that I would just take away from that game is going into next year. Don't overthink it and try to look at the guys that are getting the most usage.
Yeah, for me, I feel like my takeaway is I got everything half right. Eagles halftime, hooray! Eagles full time, not so much. Defensive touchdown, hooray! Philadelphia, not so much. Travis Kelce touchdown, no Jason Kelce touchdown. So yeah, I'm happy about the Patrick Mahomes insurance at halftime. I laughed on the app. I came away 8-11 on Super Bowl bets for minus 0.17 units. That is a lot of analysis and writing and articles and bets to come away basically right back where I started. Hopefully we got some good wins along the way. So yeah, I was more in the Eagles of this one. I think my biggest miss was Eagles sacks. I thought we were going to play a big role and a lot of pressure, and that just wasn't a factor here. And I thought the Chiefs play calling, getting the ball out quickly was a big help there. Obviously the slippery field didn't help on the pass rush as well there, but yeah, not the way I would have wanted to end the season. I would have loved to see the Eagles bets come home a little bit more. Even Devontae, MVP, 100 yards, led the game, had the one big catch near halftime, could have changed the game and put them up a little further. It's a game of inches, and some of the inches came out in the wrong direction for me, but fun game, fun season. Let's recap.
FanDuel is our presenting sponsor. Your boy has a ticket from August 5th. Kansas City outright winner plus 950. Cashed that last night.
Let's
that
go.
Felt good. That felt good. So